Good evening, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. It's a pleasure to welcome you back. We're very happy to have Casey Kemp today, who'll be telling us about the Khyentse Vision Project, very exciting project under the auspices of Jamyang Khyentse, who's doing lots of fantastic work, including this translation of all the collected works of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo plus more, which Casey will tell us more about. I won't say much else. The talk will last about an hour, give or take, and we'll have some questions at the end. So if you want to write your questions in the chat, you're welcome to, or otherwise you can just ask Casey questions at the end. So on behalf of Shangshung UK, welcome, Casey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamyang. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. See if this works. Let me know, Jamyang, if this is working for everyone.
Yeah, we're seeing you perfectly.
Okay, great. Alrighty. So first of all, a big hello and thanks for everyone taking your time to join us this evening to talk about something that I'm obviously very passionate about and very happy to share with everyone, this great new project called the Khyentse Vision Project, which is an initiative to translate all of the collected writings of the 19th-century Rimé master, Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. So today we'll just be talking a little bit about Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, his life, his legacy, what makes him particularly significant to Tibetan Buddhism. And then we'll talk a little bit about the project, where it's at, where it's going, and also connections with Chogyam Namkhai Norbu as well to the lineage. And then, yeah, just open it up to questions at the end. So we'll just jump right in. So just to give a brief introduction for those of you who don't know who Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was, he was a very realized and accomplished treasure revealer, scholar, non-sectarian, Rimé meditation master of the 19th century. He was born on July 11th, 1820, amid very auspicious signs, as great meditation masters tend to do. One particularly interesting auspicious sign of his birth was when he actually was born, he was wrapped in his placenta in the shape of a robe. So it was wrapping around him as a robe, monk's robe. When he was 12, he was recognized as the reincarnation of Tarche Kenshin Jampa Namkha Chime, and was known from there on as the Tartse Tuku, Tartse being a monastery, a Sakya monastery. He, from a young age, had many visions of Padmasambhava and Yeshe Tsogyal, who bestowed teachings to him and started revealing treasures from the time he was 8 years old. At 17, he actually came down with an illness. He actually came down with severe food poisoning, similar to the Buddha, and actually went to, he had a near-death experience and went to all 6 realms of existence and came back and actually was considered a Delok from that point on. Deloks, who are traditionally in Tibet, are usually female, let's say, visionaries who die and return from the dead. But Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo is one of those rare unique circumstances of actually a male Delok. He studied Tibetan medicine as well from his youth. This is evident in his collected work. So he actually has many Tibetan medical formulas that are preserved in his kabum and his sungbum. He began studying at Sakya Ngor Monastery in central Tibet from the time he was 20. And at 21, he took full ordination, and was a monk from there from the rest of his life. He also was known for his pilgrimages throughout Tibet. He traveled for a total of 13 years, visiting all of the major pilgrimage sites of central Tibet. And actually, he was the first Tibetan master to actually write a comprehensive guide to the pilgrimage sites of Tibet. This was the most definitive version of which was published by Matthew Ackister. I'm not sure if you guys can see this in my little screen, but this is a really amazing publication that I definitely highly recommend everyone get. It's incredible and a really big contribution. After his 13 years of traveling throughout Tibet, he He came back to Kham, to Dzongsar, where he remained for the remainder of his life, going in and out of strict retreat. He was also responsible for developing Dzongsar. He became the abbot of Dzongsar and really built up this monastery, and really kind of heralded a renaissance of teachings and of production of collections of Tibetan works, coming out of Dzongsar, working together closely with Jamyang Khyentse Lodro Thaye and Chogyur Lingpa to produce large compendiums, encyclopedic volumes of precious Tibetan teachings from all different major Tibetan traditions. And also, of course, he was a great treasure revealer, and revealed countless treasures in his lifetime, most of which are preserved in his collected works and are practiced to this day by many Sangha communities. So Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, probably if you've heard of him, you have heard of him in tandem with the term Rimé. What does this mean? Rimé, as many of you know, is this non-sectarian spirit or non-sectarian movement, as some call, of the 19th century in particular, which was this real kind of push or approach toward respecting and honoring all Tibetan traditions, all Tibetan lineages and teachings, particularly those in decline, making a real effort to preserve and disseminate these teachings. This was spearheaded by Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo along with Jamyang Kongtrul and Chogyur Lingpa, and they actually made basically this Rimé spirit, which had been alive and been present in many masters throughout the past, of really respecting all traditions and learning from all masters of all lineages. They actually made this more of a self-conscious project that is actually reflected in the large compendiums that they created. So some of you may have heard of the Treasury of Knowledge, or the Treasury of Precious Instructions, or the Rinchen Terzu. These are all collections that were created under the auspices of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, working together with Jamyang Kongtrul, with some of his other students like Lothair Wangpo, to really preserve and put into a single compendium all the major teachings that we find across the traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, and really giving equal weight to each and their own. So unlike, there's sometimes this idea that the Rimé is this kind of combining or synthesizing all of the different lineage traditions. That's not the case at all. It's actually just respecting each individual tradition in its own right as lineage traditions that go back to the teachings of the Buddha themselves, and so therefore deserve respect, preservation, and teachings. And this was some people see this as a reaction to the extreme sectarianism that was happening in central Tibet at the time. So this project that's happening in Derge, supported by the Derge royal family, supported by just the Derge population, the people of Kham, very much so, that this was actually kind of seen as a renaissance of the different traditions coming together. And this really was focusing a lot on sadhanas, commentaries, teaching histories, as well as many termas as well. So this kind of Rimé spirit is reflected with what Khyentse Wangpo, how he divided the different lineage traditions. So as opposed to what many of us have heard about, like the 4 or 5 schools of Tibetan Buddhism, Khyentse Wangpo focused a lot on what he calls the 8 great chariots. So when he was dividing his teachings, or kind of putting them together in these compendiums, he was dividing them based on these 8 great chariots. And these 8 great chariots are emphasized essentially the lineage tradition that comes back to India. So you'll notice we have Nyingma, we have Kadam, we have Sakya, we have Marpa Kagyu, Shangpa Kagyu, the Kala Chakra traditions, Shije and Chu, and then the approach and accomplishment of the 3 Vajras. So all of these 8 traditions all are traced back to basically a Tibetan master who went to India and brought these teachings into Tibet. So here we have actually a Thangka image of the masters, the founders of all of those 8 great traditions. And then you'll see in the corner, we'll actually see also Dopopa is added there to represent the Jonang lineage. So the Jonang, while Khyentse Wangpo did write extensively on the Jonang lineage, and that was also one of the lineage he preserved, it doesn't count as one of the 8 great chariots because it doesn't trace its lineage back to India. So this eight great lineages too, I just want to mention, is also what we see, 8 great chariots is also what we see as part of the division or structure of the Treasury of Precious Instructions, which is actually currently being translated in full by the Sadra Foundation. It's doing a really amazing job there. And then that collection includes the 8 great chariots, but also on top of that includes a volume on Jonang and a volume on the Mahasiddhas, and I think another additional miscellaneous volume. Okay, and so this Rimé spirit that Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo really represents, was really spearheading in the 19th century, in a time of political upheaval and time of extreme sectarianism, really trying to emphasize, okay, let's bring all of the different teachings together into these compendiums, let's preserve them, let's disseminate them. That's really reflected too in what's considered his previous incarnations. So when we see praises and prayers to Khyentse Wangpo, he's always connected to masters of all the major traditions of Buddhism. So you'll see here some very familiar names. This is actually an image, I believe this photo was taken by Matthew Ricard, and it's preserved in Matthew Ackester's Life of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, which is a really great publication, and I recommend everyone to get that one as well. And so here he went ahead and actually identified the various masters that we can see in this Thangka depiction. So you'll see some familiar names like Manjushri Mitra, Vimala Mitra, Trisong Detsen. He's often, particularly Vimala Mitra and Trisong Detsen, he's considered really representative of these masters and an incarnation of them. Also Gampopa, you'll see there, Atisha's disciple Dromtompa, 5th Dalai Lama, Longchenpa. So you really have the whole gamut there. And then, of course, some of the most famous, well-known tertons, treasure revealers like Nangrel, Nima Uzer, Orgyen Lingpa, and Jigme Lingpa, of course. So Jigme Lingpa is someone that Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo is also particularly connected to, and actually is credited with having rediscovered quite a few of Jigme Lingpa's termas. So just to throw out some examples from the Khyentse Vision Project translation team, we actually have already published a few translations of the collected works. And so these are actually available freely for download online. And I just wanted to show you some examples of what we have up. So these are actually 2 praises to the previous incarnations of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. So you can see actually a lot of those people that were identified in the previous Thangka image. You can see these actually mentioned in these praises to his previous incarnations, which are preserved in his collected works and have been translated by Khyentse Vision Project. So you can download these and read these on your own time. Just so you guys know, Generating Wonder and Glory was actually written by Kongtrul. So this is kind of a praise or supplication to his previous incarnations to receive the blessings. And then we have the Amazing Line of Incarnations. And this is actually written by Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo himself, recognizing his previous incarnations and noting them down. The Generating Wonder and Glory was translated by Ryan Jacobson, and Amazing Line of Incarnations was translated by Philippe Turenne. So in terms of the legacy, in terms of what Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was really known for, he was really considered one of the most erudite scholars of his time. He studied Sanskrit, he studied grammar, he studied philosophy. He wrote quite a bit of works that you'll find in his collections on the view, on logic, on just philosophical systems. Here we have an example from one of our translations where he's systematically refuting the view of the self in relation to basically the Brahmanical system. And then he goes through one by one different philosophical systems, including some Buddhist ones, where he's refuting wrong views one by one using logic. And they're quite pithy, they're quite sharp, and they're just really great reads. He was also known for his poetry, for his command of grammar. This is evident in his collected works as well. He, I think, I forget how many texts, but he, at least 1 to 1.5 volumes of his entire collections are dedicated to his songs, his poetry, his praises, his kind of, just kind of his really beautiful writing. Here, I can't help it. I'm gonna have to read this one out loud just because it's so beautiful. This is just a passage from his Cuckoo song. This was translated by Zach Beer. So I'll just quickly read it for you all. When I look up and see the canopy of the sun circling the center of the bright sky over the 4 lands, I remember now, during the daylight of freedoms and endowments, I must tread the pathway to unexcelled liberation. When I look away and see the well-plowed field, with each crop ripening in its own way, I remember I should work hard at deeds conducive to liberation, since good and bad actions bear fruit without fail. When I look nearby and see humans stalking innocent wild animals in the verdant valley like a playground for them, I remember while I postpone applying the means to sublime liberation, the relentless Lord of Death swiftly catches me in his rope. So that's just a really nice little taster of his just beautiful, poetics. And of course, Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was not only a great scholar, not only a great poet, but he was also an amazing tantrika, accomplished tantrika from the time he was 37 years old, after he was traveling for 13 years throughout central Tibet, receiving as many teachings as he possibly could, receiving as many transmissions as he could from rare and dying tantric lineages, as well as the more well-known and prominent ones. He vowed to put these teachings into practice and to accomplish these practices, and remained largely in retreat from the time he was 37 in Zongsar. He wrote pithy sadhanas that fill up probably the majority of his collected works, and he often wrote probably almost more than, I wouldn't necessarily more, but almost more than any other a deity that he would write sadhanas about. It would be Manjushri. If not, it's probably the majority of his works, almost there at least. And here we actually have an image of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo depicting himself as a Mahasiddha or Siddha, and he's actually holding the sword of wisdom, a symbol of Manjushri himself. So probably what Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was known most for, beyond his scholasticism, beyond his poetry, beyond even being a great tantrika, was him being a great terton, we can say. So his terton name was Pema Usaldonak Lingpa. So whenever you see this name in any sadhanas or any teachings, that is Khyentse Wangpo himself. He was said to be the holder of all 7 forms of transmission. So the oral traditions, which are the lineage tradition, traditional lineage traditions and transmissions, earth treasures that he would discover, rediscovered treasures that were previously discovered by previous tertons, mind treasures that would come to him in visions, hearing lineages, pure visions, and remembrances of past lives or remembrances, Jajan. So if, for example, just for those of you who might be practicing some of his termas, the Jetsun Ningtik is a young ter that was originally discovered by Jetsun Sengye Wangchuk, and this was rediscovered by Pema Usel Donak Lingpa. And then his famous Chime Pagme Ningtik is actually a mind treasure, a gong ter. And just as a quick example of one of our publications, we have a lineage prayer for the Sasam Driljuk, which is also a young tear that was originally discovered by Sangye Lama. And this is one of the main or core treasure cycles that you also find in the Rinchen Terzo collection, which was a collection also spearheaded by Jamgon Kongtrul and he worked together with Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. And then Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was also well known and famous, and this is probably why, one of the reasons why he means a lot to all of us as well, is because he had many realized disciples that were able to disseminate his teachings and continue the lineage transmission for the future generations. So of course, Jamgon Kongtrul and Chogyur Lingpa, Jamgon Kongtrul, who he met from the time he was 20, Chogyur Lingpa he met in his 30s. These three were really working very, very closely together, and they would actually give each other transmissions. So they would receive a transmission from one master, and then they would give each other the transmission. So they considered each other's teachers, but certainly Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was considered the senior of the three. Mipham Rinpoche is probably the most well-known and famous Nyingma Lama after Longchenpa. And he was a direct disciple and worked very, very closely with Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. The 15th Karmapa, the 35th Sakya Treason, the Taisutupas, sorry guys, Dodrupchen Rinpoche, Lothair Wangpo, who many of you may have heard of, who was responsible for collecting the Druptak Kundu, which is the teaching collection that Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche will be teaching on very shortly in Bir. Also, Ayu Khandro might be a familiar name to some of you, and Adzom Drukpa. Ayu Khandro was a teacher of Chogyal Namkhai Norbu. She was a great she was a great yogini who bestowed Dzogchen teachings, and Adzom Drukpa is actually the previous incarnation of Chogyal Namkhai Norbu. And Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo is also very well known for his many, many reincarnations. So Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was said to take rebirth in 5 different forms. So in his mind, body, speech, qualities and activity forms, but he happened to have taken rebirth, it seems, to many, many more than just 5. So we have at least probably 9, if not more. It's really hard to count of how many direct recognized reincarnations there are of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, but some of the more well-known ones are listed here. So I'm sure some of these names are quite familiar. We have Dildo Khyentse Rinpoche, who was actually recognized by Lothair Wangpo, his disciple Lothair Wangpo himself. Jamyang Choki Wangpo, who died prematurely, and Jamyang Choki Wangchuk was the next incarnation. And Jamyang Choki Wangchuk was also a teacher of Chogyal Namkhai Norbu, who actually wrote his biography. Guru Sewang, one of the first Dzogchen Khyentse. We have Pakchok Dorje, Karma Khyentse was there, who is the Beru Khyentse, the first Beru Khyentse. We have Nawang Tutuk Wangchuk, who was the 40th Sakya Treason. And then we have, of course, Jamyang Khyentse Choki Lodro, who is the previous incarnation of Jigme Khyentse Rinpoche and Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche, as well as other lamas. So moving on to Khyentse Wangpo's writings. So not only did he leave us with a wealth of amazing students, amazing reincarnations, he also left us with a wealth of writings. So we have tens of thousands of pages of his works that are still preserved. These teachings, these writings amount to basically anything that you can imagine of kind of the Tibet's literary genre. So we have philosophy, as we've mentioned, meditation instructions, biographies, and histories. He has some very important histories there that are currently being translated by Matthew Ackister. We have poetry, we have tantric teachings, medicine, and of course, a lot of terma literature. So these were collated or collected by his students into what we call in kind of Tibetan tradition, kabum or sungbum. So that's his collected works. And then we also have his kabapdun collection, which was actually formed by Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. And this is his collection of his 7 transmissions. So his 7 so this primarily is his terma collection. Okay, just to take a breather, we're going to move on now to talk a little bit about Khyentse Vision Project, which is an initiative to translate these collected works. So just to give everyone a project overview, just a quick one, just for those of you who don't know, Khyentse Vision Project, which is a new initiative, is publishing both of his collected works, translating and publishing them freely online. It's about 30,000 pages altogether, Tibetan pages, and some of you may already know, some of you may be translators, know that this will take a lot of effort and a lot of time. So we definitely, we have our work cut out for us. The mission is to make this treasury of teachings widely accessible to a global community of practitioners, scholars, just by publishing high quality translations that we can really rely on for generations to come. Our aspiration that we're hoping for eventually is to become an online hub for translations of various Khyentse lineage masters and kind of be that support for the Khyentse lineage teachings. And then, of course, our inspiration and our kind of founding guide is Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche, who is our principal advisor. So just to talk a little bit more about the project in terms of our priorities, we've identified 6 main priorities that we really are trying to focus on as we're going about this very large task. So one is that while we're going about this translation project, we're trying to think about it from a larger perspective, a long-term perspective of what we can really contribute to kind of building a culture of Tibetan teachings and what this really means. So I think something that's very important for a translation project is always to consider the next generation of translators. As many of you know, it's people and resources. It's very rare indeed to find these things in this day and age of people that are actually not only able and have the willingness and inspiration to become a translator, but also have the support, the financial support primarily, to actually follow such a path. So really trying to create circumstances that can really facilitate and encourage translators to feel inspired, to feel like they're part of a project, to feel like, you know, we're actually doing something together and that we're doing something that's really hopefully valuable as a team too, and that we're not kind of siloed off. We're really trying to work together as much as possible. So this includes, so kind of practically what this means is we have translator training as part of our project. So we're inviting some younger translators to join, to get trained, to kind of intern, to be mentored, to really make sure that we kind of create an environment where they can actually flourish. And of course, we want to support Buddhist communities by offering them reliable translations. So many of these texts are sadhanas that are practiced by various Sangha communities, and we want to make sure that they're accessible to everyone as much as possible. So this means that they're reliable. It means that the editing and the publishing process is really strong. This means that it's not kind of too Sangha specific in as well, that we really want to make sure that everyone feels like that they can use these translations as part of their Sangha practice. And we just want to make sure that the language, the translations are accessible as well. So we don't want to, we really are thinking about making sure that we are able to share these teachings with as many people as possible. So practically what this means is they're for free, for starters. That's number one, of course, but also that, you know, we're letting people know about them. we're trying to collaborate with different Sangha communities, with different translation initiatives. We just really want to emphasize not being siloed off. So we really also want to make sure that we're fostering a sense of collaboration with other translators in the community, and we have a really strong team culture ourselves. We also want to make sure that, for all of your sakes, that we do have a strong academic rigor. So we have a really strong sense of our translation methodology, that we're really taking concerns of the source text into account, that we're not kind of adding things in, thoughtlessly, that we're really trying to stay true to the source text as much as possible, so you can feel that they're reliable. And then, of course, when we're thinking about long term, we have to also think about engaging younger practitioners as well. So not just in terms of translators, but also practitioners who could potentially connect with this lineage, with these teachings, with these sadhanas. Just making sure that there is kind of a concerted effort to engage younger people. So this practically means, for example, we have this verse to music initiative where we're putting these translations that we have that are in verse, we actually are putting them into meter and then inviting different artists to create different musical renditions. And I really highly recommend attending them. They're going to be a lot of fun. Our next one's with Eric Pema Kunzong, who also cares a lot about this. And this initiative as well. So that's really important as well, is to kind of think about how can we bring life and freshness to these teachings and really build this culture of this collection. So to talk about the team a little bit more, so we have a pretty diverse team. 12 different nationalities. We're all over the world. Everyone's scattered. We have people in Asia. We have people in Europe. We have people in America. So we have people in South America. We have people really everywhere. The team is made up of expert translators, professional editors, and Himalayan consultants. I'm sure some of these faces are familiar to many of you. Most of our team have either studied at top universities, have been long-term practitioners, have been long-term translators. Some of our star translators that we have is Matthew Ackister, who we've mentioned a few times already, who's really focusing on our histories. We have Philippe Turenne, we have Zach Beer, we have Bertha Jensen, we have Christian Berner, we have Dotuku, we have Sodom Jomso, sorry, just naming them all real quick, Jamie Creek, Heidi Nevin, and Dan McNamara. So we have a really great team. Everyone's just super talented, and we have a pretty diverse range of background experience, which is really helping. And we also have some great contributing translators as well. So we have a big part of our project is to not reinvent the wheel as well. So we don't want to necessarily retranslate texts that have already been translated. If they've been done thoughtfully, done well, we really want to make sure that we're working together with those translators who have already been translating Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo's works. We know that there is a tradition of this has already started, and we really want to make sure that we're engaging those translators as much as possible and really trying to work with them to make sure that we can have their translations incorporated into the project. So some of these are, I'm sure, familiar faces as well. We also have contract translators that produce new translations for us as well. And so just some of the just a little insight into the project. This is kind of, this is a little, let's say, like a background look under the hood, let's say, a look under the hood of the project. This is our detailed catalog that we've developed. Jamie Creek has been really spearheading this and doing an amazing, fantastic job. We have basically every text of both collections, and we're talking thousands and thousands of texts, not only identified and called out in terms of their page range and location. Not only that, but we're finding the locations in other editions and other collections. We're identifying those. We're identifying what the category is. We're translating the titles of all these texts. We just have so much data just being built and collective knowledge that we're building together about these collections and what's actually inside of them. And it's really we're learning so much about just this project that Khyentse Wangpo had, and just kind of the range of teachings he had is just absolutely incredible. And then here is a quick preview as well to what our reading room is going to look like. So you won't see this currently on the website. The website, we are only have our translations available as downloadable PDFs, but we do have a reading room that's being built, an interactive reading room, and this will be available and live next year. And here's a little look into what it's going to look like. We took a lot of inspiration, obviously, from 84,000, who has kind of spearheaded these types of large translation projects. They've been a huge inspiration for us. And you'll see a brief introduction and introducing you to the world of the text. Then you'll have the translation, and you can close things up. You'll have a lot of control over what you're actually seeing and what you don't want to bother seeing. And then you can, of course, still download it as a PDF or an EPUB if you wish. There'll also be the Tibetan text that we're hoping to align as well, and that's going to be pulled from Sadra's Khyentse lineage site. So they actually are going to be housing the source text, the Tibetan text of the entire collection of the Khabab Dun and the collected works of Khyentse Wangpo. So we'll be connecting a lot with their website. As well as we're hoping to also include related materials. So you'll be able to see images, associated teachings with that text, associated articles. So you'll just kind of get a taste of the entire world of that text that we have available. And in terms of our translation progress so far, this is actually a little bit out of date, but what we've made a little bit more progress in at this point. But just to give you a rough sense, we've been able to publish so far about probably closer to 150 pages of text. We have closer to 2,000 pages in that have already been translated or are going through the editorial process now. We have over 3,000 pages of text that are actually previously published that we've been able to identify, and we're working with those translators who have previously translated his works to kind of incorporate them to our website. So that's about 10%, and then we're working currently on about 5%, and then we have quite a bit to go, but we're getting there. And then just to kind of start closing out this very brief overview of Khyentse Wangpo and his and the Khyentse Vision Project, just wanted to give you guys some extra resources. I can also send this entire PowerPoint around as a PDF to anyone who wants it afterward, because there's quite a few links in here. But I just wanted to make these available for you as well. Some other resources to learn more about Khyentse Wangpo, his legacy, and his works. We have, of course, Matthew Akaser has done by far the most work on his history, on his life, on his guide to Central Tibet. Also, of course, Chogyam Nankaj Norbu wrote The Lamp That Enlightens Narrow Minds, which is the biography of his previous incarnation, Khyentse Chokyi Wangchuk, or sorry, subsequent incarnation, Khyentse Chokyi Wangchuk. We have Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche's biography of Jamgon Khyentse Lodro as well, which is also very insightful. Of course, Alex Gardner's Life of Jamgon Kongtrul the Great is also a really interesting read, and there's a lot there about Jamgon Kongtrul's relationship with Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. Lotsawa House also has many publications of Khyentse Wangpo's works. Sadra Foundation, as I mentioned before, will be housing his Tibetan collections. Treasury of Lives also has a lot of relevant information about Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo and his students and his subsequent incarnations. So you can find a lot of good information there. BDRC has tons of information and tons of texts. Himalayan Art Resources also has some great images. And Jeff Watt has also done some good work on Khyentse Wangpo's iconography. So you'll see here in this image of Khyentse Wangpo, which I haven't mentioned yet, but he's wearing the Pandita's hat. He's holding the Vajra and bell. He has on one lotus, he has the vase of life, and then in the other, he has a book and sword, which also represent Manjushri. And yes, so just wanting to encourage everyone to, if you want to learn more about the project, if you want to get involved, if you want to just, just kind of be part of the project, please visit the website, please sign up for our mailing list, which you'll receive newsletters, and just please keep reading the text more than anything. And I just wanted to close it out quickly with a melodious speech that gathers auspiciousness. This is a kind of a homage to the, or a prayer to the Khyentse lineage. So I'll just read it quickly. Knowing all there is to be known, how it is and how it appears, through non-referential compassion, thinking of beings as if your own children, you are the Dharma King who churns the depths of samsara. Noble Khyentse Wangpo, I supplicate you. Great charioteer of the complete teachings of Shakyamuni, you are the friend who impartially tames all those to be tamed of all traditions. One who is the crown jewel, I supplicate you. Performing all activities solely for the benefit of others, you possess the manifold wondrous signs of benefiting all those with whom you are connected and create inconceivable great accumulation of merit. Noble sovereign of the 10th Bhumi, I supplicate you. All right, and that is it from me. I'm going to stop my sharing. I think I talked really fast, guys, so sorry if you didn't get all that.
Thank you, Casey, for covering so much and giving us an insight and overview of what you're doing. A huge, massive, ambitious project. Incredible, really. And I'm sure it'll go on for decades, future generations. So it's really the beginning of something great. Thank you. And yeah, if anybody has questions, I see something in the chat. I would be interested in the PDF. Yes, we can send that out. This talk will go up on YouTube eventually. So we have a YouTube channel, Shangshung UK. All our talks eventually get put up. So yeah, Casey does talk very fast, but she's had so much in little time. So thank you, Casey. And yeah, maybe you send me the PDF, we can send it out to the whoever signed up. Casey just put her email in the chat. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, please, you're welcome. You can unmute yourself or write them in the chat and we can take it from there. Okay, maybe I'll ask you something then while people are thinking. Which places are the sort of teachings of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo being practiced the most? I imagine Dzongsa are in Tibet and maybe B, Dzongsa Khyentse is based. Are there any other sort of key lamas transmitting now?
Yeah, quite a few actually, because of just his line of kind of incarnations, and because he has these very important terma cycles that many other teachers are actually teaching on as well. So Organ Tokyo Rinpoche, the Rigpa community, also Pakchok Rinpoche as well, I believe Chokyi Nyima Rinpoche as well. I mean, a lot of the contemporary masters are actually teaching a lot of these, particularly the terma cycles, as well as his sadhana teachings. And of course, Chokling, the Chokling community.
And this big event, which is about to happen in India and Bir, you mentioned, is that going to be the whole Sungbum of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo that's being transmitted? I haven't read the details about it. What's happening in just a week or so in India? I believe there's a big, massive Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo.
So that actually is a different compendium, but it was initiated by Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. So it's called the Collection of Sadhanas. So the Druptap Kundu is, or Compendium of Sadhanas is how it's translated. And this is a collection that was initially started by Khyentse Wangpo, that basically to gather all of the sadhana, all like kind of the big important sadhanas from all the various different lineages, traditions, to basically have this compendium that if people use, they'll basically have everything they need in terms of like sadhanas from all the different traditions. This, along with the Gyude Kundu, which is the compendium of tantras, these were both actually kind of carried through and completed by his student Lothair Wangpo. So they're primarily taught or practiced through the Sakya tradition, but also through the kind of Khyentse lineage as well. So these are all Rimé collections. So they're all from all different traditions and different lineages, but they're these kind of large compendiums that include all, kind of the whole gambit, basically, of kind of the main deities, the main kind of protector deities, higher yoga tantra deities. I mean, you have the whole gambit there.
Indeed, very rich. Do you see the questions in the chat, Casey?
Yes, Kathy, could you talk more about? So I don't know too much about Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo and Jigme Lingpa beyond the fact that Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was considered a reincarnation of Jigme Lingpa and rediscovered some of his treasures. But beyond that, basically they say that they're inseparable. That that this was an incarnation, an avatar of Jigme Lingpa was Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo himself. So they're considered by the lineage tradition as practically inseparable, as really close. You'll see Jigme Lingpa mentioned in many of the lineage prayers of Khyentse Wangpo's works. But beyond that, I don't have a lot of much else to say at this point. Yeah, I hear you, Saraswati, about the fact that there are so many treasuries, and basically we can understand them as encyclopedic volumes that they tried to create in kind of the Derge area at this time. There was a lot of sponsorship happening, a lot of momentum, a lot of energy and resources going towards just kind of making sure that not only were these teachings received and transmitted actively in Derge at this time, but also that they were written down. And so what they would do is they would sit together, primarily Kongtrul, Khyentse Wangpo, and Lodro Wangpo, and they would sit like for hours and hours, days and days, months and months, years and years, where they would try to systematically organize these teachings, these instructions, these transmissions, these empowerment manuals, kind of seeing them in like their individual lineage traditions or terma cycles. And then if things were missing that they hadn't already been able to gather during their travels, during the pilgrimages, during the reception of teachings that they received, they would actually write additional commentaries. They would complete sadhana cycles that maybe had missing parts. So there was a systematic effort to really kind of get this idea of a complete encyclopedic volume of all of the tantric teachings, basically, of Tibet. And this includes actually Bonpo teachings too, not so much in these collections, but you do actually have an effort there as well. I do think having some sort of map or basic guide will definitely help us start kind of thinking through a little bit better the different collections and what they have in them, and how they relate. So for example, just quickly about referring back to Jamyang's question about the Drupta Kundu, the compendium sadhanas that Khyentse that was slip of the tongue, Dzongtsar Khyentse will be teaching on very shortly. That actually, there's a lot of overlap with the teachings that are found there. So the praises, the sadhanas, it's a collection of various texts of these sadhana cycles. You'll actually see a lot of those texts also in the Sungbum of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. So it's not like you'll only find a text in one place. In these various compendiums, you'll have a lot of overlap. They're just these encyclopedic compendiums that are trying to be comprehensive with a basic theme for each of them. So we have Treasury of Knowledge, which is the systems of thought. We have the Treasury of Precious Instructions, which are more about the tantric lineage traditions, and so like central teachings to that. Then we have the tantric one, the sadhanas one. So they're all just designed to really thematically make sure you can go have a one-stop shop where of all the major lineages, that you'll be able to find the kind of the big teachings that they considered at that time, kind of the central ones or the most important ones. And not even the central or most important, but sometimes the rarest. So you'd have this kind of funny tension where you'd have some of the biggest or most central teachings right next to some of the rarest teachings that you couldn't find almost any master to be teaching on. And it was like one or two masters were left alive, and they made sure that they were going to get that teaching and preserve it somewhere and put it into that volume, encyclopedic volume. Leon mentions if we're interested in publishing them as books. Yes, definitely at some point. We do want to make sure our primary concern is that they're freely available. Publishing books is very, very expensive. But if we can work with a publisher in the future, that is definitely something we will think of. You yourself can also download the texts and bind them however you want as a spiral binding. You can do whatever you want with the text as well. So in the meantime, at least in the interim, but eventually it would be great to also have them available in book form. Christina asked about how controversial Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo was. I don't think he was very controversial at all. I mean, please someone else who might know better than I to chime in at that time, but he was actually considered to be very politically savvy and very savvy regarding the working with different masters from different monasteries in the area. He kind of avoided kind of the worst of the political tensions with central Tibet, with China. He really kind of kept a steady ground and was considered very widely from a very early time to be a really erudite master. He wasn't considered a controversial terton by any means. Because of his standing from a young age, of his recognition of he was born, I think it was the son of the secretary of the king of Derge. So he was kind of already integrated into kind of the cultural milieu there. And he was kind of always supported by institutions of power. And he would also, but he was such a dedicated yogi and practitioner as well, by traveling on his own, by this real desire to collect these different teachings. I think it was really, relatively speaking, from what I've read so far, not too controversial relative to some other masters of that time, because he really tried to work together with people, and that's really his kind of spirit, is this thing of really collaboration and working together, and not kind of disregarding different lineages or different teachings or different monasteries, and really working very closely. Any other questions?
Casey,
yeah.
I have last question if nobody has another one. During the Cultural Revolution, there's so much work of Jamyang Khyentse, as you said, thousands and thousands of pages. Where, as far as you know, was a lot of it lost during the Cultural Revolution, or was it mostly preserved?
I think it was mostly preserved. I think a lot of it left Tibet. So at the time, I forget who, I think it was Khyentse Choki Lodro, I think, but I can't say this for certain. But basically his collected works did exit Tibet, and then they were brought back into Tibet eventually. So when they did exit Tibet, his collected works, it was actually Gene Smith who cataloged them. It was originally in 24 volumes, and it was originally in 13 volumes, and then he split the volumes into 24 so he could get funding from the Library of Congress to scan them. So they've been around since then, and they've been scanned since then. So we really have actually a pretty good, and that collection was probably one of the kind of earliest witnesses we have. It was actually the block print was made in 1919, so not too long after his death, and I think we've had that, and then we've also had the Rinchen Terzo, which has a lot of his. Which preserves a lot of his work. So when we're talking about the Kabab Jun, many of those texts, if not the majority of those texts, actually that Dilgo Khyentse gathered, actually came from the Rinchen Terzo, and the Rinchen Terzo was preserved in its entirety as well. All of those texts.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Hey, well done. I think on behalf of everybody, thank you so much. Really fascinating project, and best of luck with it. It's a long, big, hard one, but we have a
great team, so that's okay.
Exactly. Such an international team, and I'm sure this is just the first step, and it'll eventually be translated into other languages, and also really fantastic. You're bringing all this knowledge to the world, and thank you, Casey. Thank you everybody
so much, Jamyang.